The blood moon hung fat and crimson in the sky, casting everything below in shades of rust and shadow. Valkyrie had always found the monthly ceremony beautiful before tonight. The way her packmates' eyes gleamed amber in the firelight. The ancient words spoken in rhythms that predated human memory. The sense of belonging to something larger than herself. Now the beauty felt like mockery. She stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle, one hand pressed discreetly against her lower abdomen where a persistent ache had been building all evening. The cramping had started hours ago, dull and annoying, but in the last few minutes it had sharpened into something that made her breath catch. Warmth trickled down her inner thigh, and when she glanced down, her heart stuttered. Blood. Not the dignified crimson of the moon above, but dark and too much of it, soaking through her ceremonial dress in a spreading stain that looked black in the firelight. "Marcus," she whispered, reaching for her mate, the man who had claimed her 2 years ago with pretty words and possessive kisses, the Alpha's son who had promised her forever. Her fingers grazed his arm, and he jerked away as if she'd burned him. "Don't touch me." His voice carried across the suddenly silent gathering, and Valkyrie realized with dawning horror that everyone had stopped chanting. Every eye in the pack was fixed on her, on the blood now pooling at her feet. "Don't you dare touch me with your weakness." The world tilted. Valkyrie grabbed for the ceremonial stone beside her, her palm scraping against rough granite as her knees buckled. The cramping had become agony, a tearing sensation deep inside that suggested something catastrophically wrong. "Please, I need a healer. The baby—" "There is no baby." Marcus's lip curled in disgust, and the firelight made a demon of his handsome face. "You're barren, Valkyrie. I've spent 2 years waiting for you to give me an heir, and you've given me nothing but disappointment. But there is—" She had only discovered it herself 3 days ago, had been waiting for the right moment to tell him. The secret joy she'd harbored felt poisonous now, curdling in her chest. "Marcus, I'm pregnant. 10 weeks, the healer confirmed. Lies." He took a step toward her, and she flinched at the rage in his eyes. The mate bond between them, once warm and golden, had gone cold weeks ago. She'd felt it withering like a plant denied water. But she'd told herself she was imagining things. Told herself that his growing distance was stress, that his cruel words were frustration, that love would return if she could just be better, stronger, enough. "I, Marcus Thorne, son of Alpha Garrett of the Shadow Creek Pack, reject you, Valkyrie Ashworth, as my mate and future Luna." The words hit her like physical blows. The mate bond didn't wither now. It shattered, a breaking inside her chest so profound that she couldn't draw breath around it. Rejection was rare among wolves, so painful that most couples tried everything before resorting to it. The severing of a mate bond could damage both parties permanently. But Marcus stood tall and unmarked, his expression one of relief rather than pain, and Valkyrie understood with sickening clarity that he'd been preparing for this. Strengthening his mental shields, distancing himself emotionally, waiting for the right moment to discard her in the most public, humiliating way possible. She collapsed fully now, her legs refusing to hold her. Blood spread around her in a grotesque halo, soaking into the earth where countless ceremonies had been held. The cramping had become a constant scream of pain, and when she pressed her hand between her legs, it came away drenched and dark. "Someone help me," she gasped, looking around the circle of packmates who had been her family. "Please, I'm hemorrhaging. The baby—" "There's no point wasting resources on her." Marcus's father, Alpha Garrett, stepped forward with the cold calculation that had always frightened Valkyrie. He was a man who measured everything in terms of pack strength and strategic advantage, and she'd never registered as either. "She's been rejected. She's no longer Shadow Creek's responsibility." "But the bleeding—" Old Helen, the pack's head healer, started forward with her medicine bag, her weathered face creased with concern. I said no. Alpha Garrett's command cracked like a whip, and Helen froze mid-step. The Alpha's word was law, and defying it meant exile or worse. Let her crawl back to whatever weak bloodlines spawned her. Shadow Creek doesn't shelter the rejected. Valkyrie's vision blurred. The pain had gone beyond cramping now. It felt like her body was tearing itself apart from the inside. She tried to shift, thinking her wolf form might be stronger, might survive this, but nothing happened. The rejection had damaged something fundamental, severing her connection to her wolf. She was alone in her own skin, dying by inches while her former pack watched with expressions ranging from pity to indifference. The child is real. The voice came from the shadows beyond the firelight, and a figure emerged that Valkyrie had never seen before. An ancient woman with eyes that reflected the blood moon like mirrors, dressed in robes that seemed to be woven from darkness itself. A traveling seer, perhaps, drawn by the ceremony. I see it burning inside her, bright as a star. Royal blood runs in her veins, dormant until now. The child has awakened it. Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. Royal blood? She's a nobody from a nothing family. Another lie? The baby will die if she does. The seer moved closer, and the pack parted before her like water, fear evident in their faces. Seers were respected and feared in equal measure, their prophecies carrying the weight of fate. And with it, a chance to unite the fractured kingdoms. Only one intervention can save them both now. Her mirror eyes fixed on Valkyrie's fading consciousness. Only the Alpha King's blood freely given can anchor the child and heal the mother. Without it, both will be ash before dawn. The Alpha King. Valkyrie had heard stories of Yuri Volkov all her life, the ruthless ruler of the Crimson Keep, the strongest alpha in 5 generations, a man who'd killed his way to the throne and held it with an iron fist. He was legend more than reality, a figure from cautionary tales told to pups. Behave, or the Alpha King will come for you in the night. Then she's dead, Marcus said flatly. The Alpha King doesn't concern himself with rejected she-wolves. Valkyrie wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to prove them all wrong, but consciousness was slipping away like water through her fingers. The blood loss had become catastrophic. She could feel her heartbeat growing irregular, her body struggling to sustain itself. The pain had paradoxically lessened, which she knew meant she was dying, her nerve endings shutting down as her systems failed. Her baby. The tiny life she'd only just discovered, the secret joy that had sustained her through Marcus's growing coldness. It would die inside her, never drawing breath, never knowing it had been wanted desperately in its final moments. I'm sorry, she thought, pressing her blood-slicked hand against her abdomen. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. The blood moon watched impassively as Valkyrie's eyes fluttered closed, the ceremonial fire crackling and the seer's prophecy hanging unanswered in the air. The first thing Valkyrie became aware of was voices, sharp, urgent, coming from somewhere above her head. Absolutely insane. Your Majesty, you cannot— I didn't ask for your opinion, Constantine. The second voice was deep, resonant, carrying an authority that made even unconsciousness seem like disobedience. How long has she been bleeding? The rejection happened approximately 30 minutes ago, Alpha King. That was a woman's voice, crisp and professional. Blood loss is severe. Without intervention, she has perhaps 10 minutes before organ failure becomes irreversible. Valkyrie tried to open her eyes, but her body felt distant and unresponsive, as if she were piloting it from very far away. The pain had receded to a dull throb, which she knew was bad. She should hurt more. The absence of agony meant her body had given up on warning signals. And the child? The deep voice again, and Valkyrie felt something brush against her forehead. A hand, large and surprisingly gentle, pushing sweat-dampened hair from her face. Alive, incredibly. The fetal heartbeat is strong despite the mother's condition, but it won't survive her death by more than a few minutes. Then we don't let her die? A rustling sound, fabric moving. Prepare for a direct transfusion. Your Majesty, no. Constantine's voice rose in alarm. A direct transfusion creates a blood bond. It's sacred, irreversible. You'd be tying yourself to a complete stranger, a rejected Omega with no pack, no status. She's pregnant and dying because her mate was a fool and a coward. The words came out as a growl, and Valkyrie felt a vibration in the air. Power, barely leashed, the kind that made instincts sit up and take notice. And you'll address me with less argument, Beta, or find yourself relieved of duty. Silence. Then, yes, Alpha King. Someone explain what happened here. A pause. Where is the Alpha of Shadow Creek? He left, Your Majesty. A new voice, shaky and old. Helen, the healer who'd tried to help. Alpha Garrett said the rejected weren't worth his time. He took the pack and went back to the compound after the ceremony ended. The growl that answered that statement made Valkyrie's unconscious form tremble. It was a sound of pure rage, the kind that promised violence and retribution. He left her to bleed out in the dirt. The Alpha King's arrival spooked them, Helen continued. They probably thought you'd come for other reasons? I came investigating reports of corruption and illegal territory seizures. The hand returned to Valkyrie's forehead, steadying. It seems I arrived just in time to witness something far worse. Start the transfusion. Valkyrie felt herself being moved, lifted as if she weighed nothing, and positioned on something softer than the blood-soaked ground. A makeshift medical tent, perhaps, erected in the minutes since she'd lost consciousness. The scent of canvas and antiseptic cut through the copper tang of her own blood. Your Majesty, I must protest one final time. Constantine's voice was strained. If she's truly your mate, then the blood bond will reveal it. Something cold pressed against the inside of Valkyrie's elbow, a needle. And if she's not, I'll have saved an innocent life, and her child. I can live with either outcome. Can you live with watching them die because protocol demanded we wait for standard medical transport? No answer came. The transfusion started as a coldness spreading up Valkyrie's arm, and then everything changed. Heat flooded her veins, not painful but intense, like swallowing sunlight. Her back arched involuntarily, and her eyes flew open to see a man kneeling beside the medical cot. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes the color of amber with silver threads running through them. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, his presence so commanding that the tent seemed too small to contain him. The Alpha King, Yuri Volkov. And his blood was flowing into her body through connected tubes, ancient magic activating where modern medicine met werewolf biology. The pain returned all at once, but transformed. Not the agony of dying, but the fierce burn of healing, her body knitting itself back together at an impossible rate. And underneath it, something else was happening, something profound. The mate bond. It slammed into existence between them like a golden chain, bright and unbreakable. And Valkyrie gasped as emotions that weren't hers flooded through the connection. Fierce protectiveness, furious concern. And underneath it all, recognition, the soul-deep knowing that every wolf dreamed of finding once in their lifetime. Yuri's eyes widened, his expression shifting from controlled concern to shock. Impossible, he whispered. The bond pulled taut between them, and Valkyrie felt her wolf, which had been unreachable since the rejection, stir for the first time in an hour. Not just stirring, but singing, recognizing its mate with a joy that was almost painful after the grief of rejection. Inside her, the baby responded too. Valkyrie felt warmth bloom in her abdomen, saw her skin briefly glow with silver light that matched the threads in Yuri's eyes. The hemorrhaging stopped completely, the torn vessels sealed by magic that predated conscious memory, the power of a true mate bond, activated and amplified by an Alpha King's blood. What? Valkyrie's voice came out as a croak, her throat raw. What did you do? Yuri stared at her, and she watched him struggle to maintain his composure. Saw the moment he locked down the emotions flooding their newborn bond. I saved your life, he said, his tone carefully neutral, and bound myself to you in the process. The child is stabilizing. The woman's voice, a medical officer Valkyrie could see now, wearing the crimson insignia of the Royal Guard. Vital signs strengthening. The transfusion is working beyond normal parameters. Because they're true mates, Constantine said from somewhere behind Yuri, his voice filled with wonder and dismay. By the moon, the prophecies are not for public discussion. Yuri cut him off sharply, but his eyes never left Valkyrie's face. His hand came up slowly, as if moving through water, and his fingers brushed her cheek with a gentleness that contradicted everything she'd ever heard about the ruthless Alpha King. You're safe now. I promise you, no one will harm you or your child again. The certainty in his voice made something inside Valkyrie crack open. Grief and relief and terror all mixed together until she couldn't tell them apart. She'd been rejected and left to die less than an hour ago, and now the most powerful alpha in the realm was calling her his mate, was looking at her like she was something precious rather than worthless. It was too much. The adrenaline that had kept her conscious drained away, and darkness rose up to claim her again. But this time, it felt like falling into safety rather than oblivion. The mate bond wrapped around her like a blanket, and Yuri's presence anchored her even as consciousness slipped away. The last thing she heard was his voice, rough with an emotion she couldn't name. Get her to the Crimson Keep, now, and send a detachment to Shadow Creek Pack. I'm going to have a very pointed conversation with their alpha about what happens to leaders who abandon dying wolves. Then there was nothing but warmth and the steady beat of a heart that matched her own, connected now by blood and fate and magic that refused to be denied. Valkyrie woke to silk sheets and sunlight, disoriented by softness after expecting to wake up dead or still bleeding in the dirt. Her hand went immediately to her abdomen, pressing gently, searching for pain or the terrible wetness of hemorrhaging. Nothing. Just a faint, warm pulse beneath her palm that she recognized with dizzy relief as her baby's heartbeat, stronger than it had any right to be. The room around her was vast and elegant, high ceilings with crown molding, walls painted in warm cream tones, furniture that looked both antique and expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens and beyond them, mountains that scraped the sky. This was wealth on a scale she'd never experienced, power made manifest in marble and gold leaf, the Crimson Keep. She was in the Alpha King's estate. Memory returned in fragments. Marcus's rejection, the blood pooling beneath her, the seer's prophecy. And then Yuri, the Alpha King himself, kneeling beside her with eyes like amber and silver, his blood flowing into her veins and creating something that shouldn't exist. The mate bond. Valkyrie could feel it now, a golden thread stretching from her chest into the distance, humming with life and connection. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. This link to a man she didn't know, a bond that couldn't be broken even if she wanted it gone. And the worst part was that she didn't want it gone. Her wolf was practically purring with contentment, finally at peace after the agony of rejection, and that contentment felt like a betrayal of her better judgment. You're awake. The voice came from the doorway, and Valkyrie's head snapped toward it to find a middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform, her expression professionally pleasant. I'm Mira, the head of household staff. His Majesty asked to be notified the moment you woke. How are you feeling? How was she feeling? Valkyrie took inventory. Physically, surprisingly well, considering she'd nearly bled to death. Emotionally, like she'd been shattered and poorly glued back together. "I'm alive," she managed. "That you are, dear." Mira moved into the room with the efficiency of someone comfortable in her environment, checking the water pitcher on the nightstand and adjusting the curtains to let in less direct sunlight. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. The healers said your body needed the rest to finish recovering from the trauma." 2 days. Valkyrie's hand pressed harder against her stomach. "The baby is perfectly healthy, according to all examinations." Mira's expression softened. "The Alpha King's blood did more than save your life. It anchored the child, strengthened it. The royal physicians have never seen anything quite like it. Because they were true mates? Because the blood bond between destined pairs carried magic that defied normal rules." Valkyrie closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the implications. "I'll inform His Majesty you're awake," Mira continued. "He's been concerned." That was probably an understatement. Through the mate bond, Valkyrie could feel a constant low-level hum of attention, as if part of Yuri's consciousness was always monitoring her, even when physically distant. It should have felt invasive. It did feel invasive, but it also felt safe in a way she hadn't experienced in months. Marcus had stopped paying attention to her long before the rejection. This hyper-awareness was almost alien in its intensity. Mira left, and Valkyrie forced herself to sit up, testing her body's responses. A little weak, a little shaky, but functional. She was wearing a nightgown she didn't recognize, soft cotton that definitely wasn't hers, and someone had bathed her while she was unconscious. The thought made her flush with embarrassment. She didn't have long to dwell on it. Less than 5 minutes after Mira's departure, the door opened again, and Yuri entered. He was different in daylight and formal clothes, still intimidating, but more controlled than he'd been during the transfusion. He wore dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and decorated with what looked like ritual scars. His dark hair was tied back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face and those extraordinary eyes that tracked her every micro-expression. "You're awake," he said, and his voice was carefully neutral, as if he were addressing a council meeting rather than the woman he'd bound himself to. But through the mate bond, Valkyrie felt his relief, profound and almost painful in its intensity. "So I'm told." Valkyrie pulled the sheets higher, suddenly self-conscious. "Thank you for saving me." "You don't need to thank me." Yuri stayed near the door, maintaining distance, and she realized he was giving her space deliberately, trying not to overwhelm her. "How much do you remember?" "Enough. Everything really, though the edges were blurry." "You performed a direct transfusion. Created a blood bond." "Yes." His jaw tightened. "I didn't know you were my mate when I made that decision. I would have saved you regardless. No one deserves to die the way you were dying." But the bond revealed the truth. True mates. The phrase hung between them, laden with implications. Valkyrie had grown up on stories of true mates, the perfect match, the other half of your soul, the bond that made you complete. She'd thought Marcus was hers, had convinced herself that the mate bond they'd shared was the real thing, even as it withered. But this connection to Yuri that hummed through every cell of her body, made her previous bond look like a pale imitation. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I was already mated, already rejected. How can I have a true mate now?" Yuri moved then, crossing to the window and staring out at his kingdom. Distance, but not abandonment. "Rejection severs artificial bonds. Marcus claimed you, but he wasn't your true mate. When he rejected you, he freed you for the bond that was always meant to exist." "You sound very certain about that." "I consulted every resource in my library while you were unconscious." He glanced back at her, and something vulnerable flickered across his expression. I needed to understand what we're dealing with. The blood bond between true mates is significant. It can't be broken, not without killing us both. And it will strengthen over time, make us more aware of each other, more connected. Valkyrie's breath caught. She'd just escaped one bond that had turned suffocating and cruel. The thought of being trapped in another, even one that felt good right now, made panic claw up her throat. I didn't ask for this. I know. Yuri's voice gentled. Neither of us asked for this. But we're here anyway, and we'll have to find a way to navigate it. What if I don't want to? The words came out sharper than she'd intended, edged with fear. What if I want to leave? Something flashed in Yuri's eyes. Pain, quickly suppressed. Through the bond, she felt his instinctive rejection of that idea, the alpha possessiveness that wanted to keep her close and safe. But when he spoke, his voice remained measured. Then you can leave. I won't hold you prisoner, Valkyrie. The bond doesn't give me ownership of you. She hadn't expected that. Marcus would have raged at the suggestion of her leaving, would have used the mate bond to reinforce his control. But Yuri just stood there, giving her the choice even as she felt his desperate hope that she'd stay. I don't know you, she said, needing him to understand. You're the Alpha King. Everyone says you're ruthless, dangerous. I am dangerous. No denial, no soft peddling. I've killed to protect my kingdom and will do so again without hesitation. I've made decisions that cost lives because they were necessary for the greater good. But I've never harmed someone under my protection, and you are very much under my protection now. The certainty in his voice made her shiver. Because of the bond. Because you're my mate. Because you were dying and deserve better than what your pack gave you. Because that child you're carrying is innocent and precious. Yuri turned to face her fully. Take whatever time you need to decide what you want. Stay here, where you're safe, and can heal. Get to know me before you make any decisions about our future. It was more than fair, more than she'd had any right to expect from a man who'd already saved her life and bound himself to her in the process. Valkyrie wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the walls that had kept her functioning through Marcus's cruelty, but exhaustion pulled at her. I'm tired, she admitted. Then rest. Yuri moved toward the door, giving her space again. Mira will bring you food when you're ready. The healers want to examine you later today. Make sure everything is progressing well with the baby. But there's no rush. He was almost out the door when Valkyrie's voice stopped him. Yuri? He turned, and the sound of his name on her lips made something tighten in his expression. Thank you, she said again, for not forcing this. His smile was small and sad. You've had enough people force their will on you, Valkyrie. I won't be another. Then he was gone, and Valkyrie was alone with the mate bond humming in her chest and questions that had no easy answers. The healers pronounced her remarkably healthy for someone who'd hemorrhaged nearly to death 2 days prior. The baby was thriving, already slightly ahead of normal development curves, strengthened by the Alpha King's blood that now ran in Valkyrie's veins. They recommended bed rest for another day or two, then gradually increasing activity. Valkyrie spent that time in a strange limbo, suspended between her traumatic past and an uncertain future. Staff came and went with meals and supplies, always polite, never intrusive. Mira checked on her regularly, chatting about inconsequential things that helped Valkyrie feel less isolated. But it was Yuri's visits that defined her days. He came every evening after his official duties were complete, always asking permission before entering, always maintaining careful distance unless she invited him closer. They talked about safe things at first. The estate grounds, the history of the Crimson Keep, neutral topics that let them learn each other's rhythms without vulnerability. But the mate bond worked against their careful boundaries. Every accidental touch sent electricity through her skin. Every shared glance felt weighted with meaning. The connection between them grew stronger daily, making it harder to remember why she needed to keep her walls intact. On the third evening of her consciousness, Yuri brought dinner himself instead of having staff deliver it, and Valkyrie felt brave enough to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "Why did you come to Shadow Creek?" She accepted the tray he offered, noting that someone had prepared all her favorite foods, information they must have gathered from her quietly, efficiently. That night of the blood moon, Yuri settled into the chair by her bed, maintaining his usual careful distance. We'd received reports of corruption. Alpha Garrett was seizing territory from smaller packs, using technicalities in pack law to justify it. I was investigating. And you just happened to arrive when I was bleeding out. The timing was fortunate. His expression darkened. Though seeing your pack abandon you like that, I've witnessed a lot of cruelty in my role, but that was particularly egregious. Valkyrie set down her fork, appetite fading. Marcus said I was barren, weak. He'd been saying it for months, actually, just not publicly. I think he was building up to the rejection, making sure everyone would agree I deserved it. You're not weak. Yuri's voice carried an edge of anger. And clearly, not barren, given the child you're carrying. He didn't know about the baby, I'd only just found out. She pressed a hand to her stomach, feeling the warm pulse of life there. I was going to tell him that night after the ceremony. I thought maybe it would fix things between us. And instead, he rejected you in the cruelest way possible. Yuri's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. I sent a detachment to Shadow Creek the morning after the transfusion. Alpha Garrett has been removed from power pending a full investigation. Marcus has been detained for questioning. Valkyrie's head snapped up. You. What? They left you to die, Valkyrie. That's not just cruelty. It's a violation of the most fundamental pack laws. Every wolf has the right to medical care, rejected or not. What they did was criminal. Part of her wanted to argue, to defend the pack that had been her home, but she couldn't find the words. Because Yuri was right. They'd watched her bleed and done nothing, and no amount of rejection justified that level of callousness. I don't want revenge, she said quietly. This isn't revenge, it's justice. Yuri leaned forward, and his eyes caught hers with intensity. You matter, Valkyrie. What happened to you matters, and I won't allow it to stand unanswered. The conviction in his voice made something crack in her chest. Marcus had spent months making her feel worthless, and her pack had agreed through their silence and complicity. But this man, this near stranger who happened to be her true mate, was upending the order of an entire pack because they'd harmed her. I don't know what to do with you, she whispered. Yuri's expression softened. You don't have to do anything, just let yourself heal. Everything else can wait. But healing wasn't just physical, and they both knew it. On her 5th day at the Crimson Keep, Valkyrie was finally cleared to leave her room. Mira helped her dress in clothes that fit, soft leggings and a flowing tunic that accommodated her still flat stomach, and offered to give her a tour of the estate. The Crimson Keep was stunning in daylight, all soaring architecture and natural light. They walked through portrait galleries where past Alpha Kings stared down with varying degrees of severity, through libraries that smelled of leather and old paper, through conservatories where exotic plants created tiny jungles under glass. His Majesty's private chambers are on the 3rd floor, East Wing, Mira mentioned as they passed a guarded staircase. Your rooms are being prepared in the same wing if you decide to stay long-term. If. The word hung heavy. Valkyrie hadn't made any decisions about her future. She was still processing her present. They were in the gardens, Mira pointing out various flowers, when Constantine found them. Yuri's beta looked harried, his usual composure cracked at the edges. Miss Ashworth, he said with a brief nod. I apologize for interrupting, but we have a situation. Where is His Majesty? Council meeting in the South Tower, Mira replied. What's wrong? Constantine's jaw tightened and his eyes flicked to Valkyrie with something that looked like pity. Security breach. Multiple hostiles. They're targeting the guest quarters. Valkyrie's blood turned to ice. Her rooms were in the guest quarters. Before she could process that information, the world exploded into chaos. The explosion came from the west side of the estate, a concussive boom that rattled windows and sent birds screaming into the sky. Constantine's hand went to the weapon at his hip as alarms began wailing through the grounds. Get her inside, he barked at Mira. Now! But it was already too late. Figures poured over the garden walls, not guards, but attackers dressed in black, moving with lethal precision. Assassins. And they were heading straight for Valkyrie. Constantine shifted in a blur of motion, his clothes shredding as his wolf form emerged, a massive gray beast that intercepted the first two attackers with vicious efficiency. But there were too many, and they were too coordinated. One broke through Constantine's defense, heading for Valkyrie with a blade that gleamed silver in the sunlight. She stumbled backward, her healing body still not fast enough, her wolf still weak from the recent trauma. The assassin raised his blade. And then Yuri was there. He appeared like a storm given flesh, his eyes blazing with silver fire, and his power rolling off him in waves that made the air itself tremble. His hand closed around the assassin's throat, and the crack of breaking bone was audible even over the alarms. Protect her! Yuri's voice was barely human, resonating with alpha command that made every wolf in range, friend and foe, freeze momentarily. Get Valkyrie inside the keep, behind the warded doors. Now. Constantine shifted back to human form, not bothering with modesty as he grabbed Valkyrie's arm. Come on. But Valkyrie couldn't move, couldn't look away from Yuri as he tore through the remaining assassins with methodical, terrifying efficiency. This was the ruthless Alpha King she'd heard stories about, not the careful, gentle man who visited her each evening, but a force of nature that destroyed anything threatening what was his. The mate bond thrummed with his rage and protective fury so intense it made her dizzy. Miss Ashworth, please. Constantine pulled harder, and finally Valkyrie's legs obeyed, letting him drag her toward the keep's entrance. Behind them, Yuri's roar split the air, more animal than man. They made it inside just as more guards poured into the gardens. Through the windows, Valkyrie watched Yuri end the last assassin with his bare hands, his chest heaving and his clothes torn. Blood splattered across his skin. None of it his. Then his eyes found her through the glass, and the intensity in them stole her breath. Possessive, protective, barely controlled. Mine, the bond seemed to whisper, mine to protect. And despite everything, her fear, her walls, her determination to stay emotionally distant, Valkyrie's wolf responded with a certainty that terrified her. Yours. The interrogation of the surviving assassin took place in the keep's dungeons, and though Valkyrie wasn't present, she felt every surge of Yuri's fury through the bond as he extracted information. Marcus had sent them. Not alone. He was working with others, a coalition of pack leaders who saw Yuri's progressive reforms as threats to their traditional power structures. The seer's prophecy had made it worse. Valkyrie's child would shift the balance of power, unite the fractured kingdoms. And they wanted the baby dead. Yuri came to her rooms after midnight, still wearing clothes stained with blood and dirt, his expression haunted. Valkyrie had been pacing since the attack, too wired to sleep, the baby's anxious flutter in her belly matching her own fear. They were after you specifically, Yuri said without preamble. Marcus sent them because he learned the truth about your bloodline. You're not just carrying a powerful child, Valkyrie. You carry ancient royal genetics yourself, dormant until pregnancy activated them. Valkyrie stared at him, uncomprehending. That's impossible. I'm nobody. My family. was probably hiding or didn't know themselves, but the royal physicians confirmed it through your blood work. You descend from the Moon Court, the original ruling line that fractured centuries ago. Yuri moved closer, and she could feel his need to touch her, reassure himself she was safe, warring with his determination to give her space. That's why Marcus rejected you publicly. He'd discovered the truth somehow, and it threatened him. A mate with royal blood would have had power to challenge his father's corruption. The world tilted. Everything she'd thought she knew about herself was being rewritten, and she didn't know how to process it. "So they want me dead," she whispered. "Want my baby dead. They'll never touch you again." Yuri's voice dropped to a growl. "I've tripled security, established wards that would hold off an army. You're safe here, Valkyrie. I swear it." She should have felt reassured. Instead, fear clawed at her throat. What if it's not enough? What if they try again? What if... Valkyrie. Yuri closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that contrasted his earlier violence. "Breathe. You're safe." But she couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the image of that blade descending, couldn't process that her entire world had turned into a target on her back. Her knees buckled, and Yuri caught her, pulling her against his chest and wrapping her in arms that felt like the only solid thing in a collapsing universe. The mate bond flared between them, warm and reassuring, his steady heartbeat anchoring her panic. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you, and I'm not letting go." And for the first time since Marcus's rejection, Valkyrie let herself lean into someone else's strength, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. Even if it terrified her to hope, she couldn't sleep. Hours after Yuri had left her rooms, after she'd pulled herself together and assured him she was fine, Valkyrie lay in the enormous bed and stared at the ceiling while her mind replayed the attack in vivid detail. The baby fluttered anxiously in her belly, responding to her stress. She pressed her hand against the movement, trying to send soothing thoughts, but her own fear made comfort impossible. Finally, she gave up on sleep and slipped from the bed, pulling on a robe and following an instinct she didn't quite understand. The mate bond pulled her through the darkened hallways, past drowsy guards who nodded respectfully, up staircases and through corridors, until she found herself outside a set of glass doors that opened onto a stone balcony. Yuri stood at the railing, still dressed in the clothes from the interrogation, staring out at his kingdom bathed in moonlight. He didn't turn when she approached, but his voice carried clearly in the night air. "Can't sleep either?" "No." Valkyrie joined him at the railing, maintaining a careful foot of distance. Below them, the Crimson Keep sprawled in elegant architecture, lights twinkling in windows where guards maintained their watch. Beyond the walls, mountains rose like sentinels, and forests stretched dark and deep. Too much adrenaline still. "I know the feeling." Yuri's hands gripped the stone railing, his knuckles white with tension. Through the bond, Valkyrie felt his roiling emotions, fury at the attack, fear that he hadn't been fast enough, determination to eliminate every threat. "You saved me," she said quietly. "Again." "I almost wasn't in time." His voice was raw. "If Constantine hadn't found you when he did, if I'd been 30 seconds slower, but you weren't." She turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw past the Alpha King to the man beneath, haunted, afraid. "Yuri, I'm okay. The baby's okay." This time, he finally met her eyes, and the anguish in them made her chest ache. "But they'll try again, Valkyrie. Marcus and his coalition won't stop until you're dead and the prophecy is prevented. And I..." He cut himself off, jaw clenched. "You what?" "I can't lose you." The words came out ragged. "I know we barely know each other. I know you're not ready to trust this bond. But the thought of failing to protect you, of watching you die when I could have prevented it. It's destroying me." Valkyrie's breath caught. In the moonlight, she could see the truth written across his face, feel it resonating through the mate bond that connected them. This wasn't just alpha possessiveness or responsibility. This was real, deep, terrifying emotion. "Tell me," she whispered. "Tell me why you're so afraid." For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he spoke. "I had a mate before. Years ago, before I became Alpha King. Her name was Elena, and I thought we were happy. Thought our bond was strong." His hands tightened on the railing. "But she was ambitious in ways I didn't understand until too late. She wanted power more than she wanted me, and when a rival faction offered her a better position, she helped them stage a coup." Horror washed through Valkyrie. "What happened?" "I survived the assassination attempt she'd facilitated." "She didn't." Yuri's voice was hollow. "I had to kill her myself when she came at me with a blade. Had to sever our mate bond with her death and feel it tear me apart from the inside. I swore after that I'd never risk my heart again, never allow anyone close enough to destroy me that way." "But then I happened," Valkyrie said softly, understanding dawning. "But then you happened." He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw fear and longing warring for dominance. "The blood bond revealed you as my true mate, something I didn't even believe existed after Elena. And now I have a second chance I never asked for, with a woman who has every reason to fear bonding with another alpha, carrying a child that makes you a target for every power-hungry wolf in the realm. So you're terrified of failing again. I'm terrified of losing you before I even have you." His voice cracked. "Before you have the chance to decide if you want me? Before I can prove I'm not like Marcus, that I'll spend every day of my life making sure you know how valuable you are." The confession hung between them, raw and honest, and Valkyrie felt her carefully maintained walls cracking. She'd been so focused on her own trauma, her own fear of rejection and betrayal, that she hadn't fully considered what this situation meant for Yuri. He'd been betrayed by his first mate, had killed her with his own hands, had locked his heart away to survive the grief, only to have fate throw a traumatized, pregnant, hunted woman into his path and declare her his second chance. No wonder he was gentle with her. No wonder he gave her space and choices. He was as terrified as she was, just for different reasons. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," Valkyrie admitted, needing to be equally honest. "Marcus broke something in me when he rejected me, made me doubt my own worth, my own judgment. I look at you and see someone who's been nothing but kind, nothing but protective, and part of me keeps waiting for it to be a lie. I know." Yuri's voice was soft. "And I'll give you all the time you need to learn that it's not. But I can tell you this." She took a step closer, closing some of the distance between them. "I'm glad you were there tonight. Glad you're the one who saved me from bleeding out under the blood moon. Glad that if I had to be bound to someone, it's you." Something in Yuri's expression shifted. Hope, fragile and tentative. "Yeah? Yeah." Valkyrie took a breath, then another step closer, near enough now to feel his body heat. "The bond is terrifying. This situation is terrifying, but you're not." "I should be." His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch sent electricity through her skin, the mate bond singing with approval. "I'm dangerous, Valkyrie. I kill without hesitation to protect what's mine." I saw. She'd watched him destroy the assassins, had felt his fury through the bond. "But you know what? Right now, with people trying to murder me and my baby, I think dangerous might be exactly what I need." Yuri's breath hitched, and then slowly, so slowly she could have stopped him at any moment, he bent his head until his forehead rested against hers. Not a kiss, but intimacy nonetheless, their breath mingling and the mate bond thrumming between them like a living thing. I failed to protect Elena, he whispered against her skin. I won't fail to protect you. And I failed to see that Marcus was destroying me slowly, Valkyrie whispered back. I won't fail to recognize the difference this time. They stood there for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, the mate bond wrapping around them like a blanket. It wasn't trust yet, not fully, but it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real from this forced connection. When Yuri finally pulled back, his eyes were clearer. Thank you for coming out here. For this. Thank you for being honest with me. Valkyrie managed a small smile. And for not letting them hurt my baby. Our baby. The words slipped out and Yuri froze, looking horrified. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... It's yours, I know that, Our baby. Valkyrie interrupted gently, placing her hand over her stomach. The child fluttered, calmer now than it had been all evening, as if it too could feel the shift between them. Your blood is keeping it alive. That makes you part of this, whether either of us planned it. The wonder that crossed Yuri's face made him look younger, less burdened. His hand lifted hesitantly toward her stomach, asking permission without words. Valkyrie nodded and guided his palm to where the baby was moving. The flutter happened again, and Yuri's breath caught, his eyes widening. That's your child too, Valkyrie said, and saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Biologically Marcus's maybe, but in every way that matters, yours. A single tear slid down Yuri's cheek, and he didn't bother wiping it away. I won't let anyone hurt either of you. I swear it on my life, Valkyrie. I believe you. And she did, at least in this. Whatever else she doubted, whatever fears still plagued her, she believed absolutely that Yuri would die before he let harm come to her or the baby. The moon watched them from above, and the mate bond hummed contentedly, as if satisfied they'd finally taken a step toward accepting what fate had decided for them. When Valkyrie leaned up on her toes and pressed a gentle kiss to Yuri's cheek, barely there, tentative and sweet, his hand came up to cup her face like she was something precious and fragile. Stay, he murmured. Not forever. Not until you're ready, but tonight. Stay with me. Let me hold you while you sleep. Let me know you're safe. Every rational part of Valkyrie's mind said it was too soon, too fast, too dangerous to her damaged heart. But the baby was calm for the first time in hours. The mate bond was practically purring with approval, and she was so tired of being afraid. Okay, she whispered. Just for tonight. Yuri led her inside to a room adjacent to the balcony. His private chambers, she realized, decorated in dark woods and deep blues. He didn't push for anything more than what she'd agreed to, just guided her to the enormous bed and lay down beside her, his arm wrapping around her waist with careful, respectful placement. The mate bond settled between them like a contented cat, and for the first time since Marcus's rejection, Valkyrie felt safe enough to truly sleep. Just for tonight, she told herself as darkness claimed her. But the warmth of Yuri's body against hers and the steady thrum of the mate bond suggested that perhaps, eventually, it could be for more than one night. Perhaps it could be forever. The spelled chamber was supposed to be unbreakable. Ancient magic woven into stone and steel, designed to contain even the most powerful alpha. Yuri's advisors had acted swiftly after his declaration that he would surrender everything for Valkyrie, locking him away for the good of the kingdom, while they negotiated with the coalition through more reasonable channels. They didn't understand what they'd done. Yuri stood in the center of the circular room, his chest heaving with barely contained fury, the mate bond stretched taut and screaming with Valkyrie's terror. She was alive. He could feel that much through their connection, but she was afraid, in pain, and he couldn't reach her. The distance between them felt like knives sliding between his ribs with every breath. Your Majesty, please. Constantine's voice came through the spelled door, strained with regret. We're trying to negotiate her release. Give us time to… Time? Yuri's voice came out as a growl that rattled the walls. They have my mate. They have my child. And you locked me in here like a rabid dog while she suffers. We couldn't let you throw away everything you've built. The kingdom needs a king who protects his people, not one who abandons his mate to save political face. Yuri's power flared, crackling through the air like lightning. The mate bond pulsed again, and this time he felt Valkyrie's pain spike, sharp, deliberate. They were hurting her. Something inside him shattered. The transformation that overtook Yuri wasn't his normal shift. This was deeper, older, a surge of alpha power that his bloodline hadn't manifested in centuries. His body erupted with silver fire, his wolf rising not as a separate entity, but merged with his human consciousness into something that transcended both forms. The spelled chamber exploded outward. Stone and steel shrieked as they tore apart, ancient magic shattering like glass against the force of Yuri's ascension. Guards scattered as he emerged from the wreckage, his eyes blazing pure silver, power rolling off him in visible waves that made the air itself tremble. Constantine stumbled backward, his face white with shock and fear. Your Majesty, where? Yuri's voice resonated with alpha command so absolute that every wolf within range dropped to their knees involuntarily. Where is the coalition hiding? We don't know the exact location. Yuri's hand shot out, closing around Constantine's throat and lifting him off the ground. Not enough to truly hurt, but enough to make his point devastatingly clear. Then find out. Now, or I start tearing apart every territory in this kingdom until I find her myself. He released Constantine, who collapsed to the ground, gasping. Around them, advisors and guards stared in horrified awe at what their king had become. Not the controlled, calculated ruler they knew, but something primal and unstoppable. I'll help you. Constantine's voice was hoarse as he struggled to his feet. I was wrong. We were all wrong. Just don't level the kingdom getting to her. Then stay out of my way. Yuri's power pulsed again, and this time every wolf present felt it, a command that bypassed conscious thought and struck directly at their instinctual cores. Mobilize every resource, every contact. I want the coalition's location within the hour, or I start making examples. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. The mate bond pulled him north, and Yuri followed it with single-minded focus, his enhanced senses tracking the thread of connection across miles of territory. Behind him, he heard Constantine barking orders, the Crimson Keep erupting into organized chaos as his people scrambled to give their king what he demanded. The first coalition hideout Yuri found was a decoy, empty buildings and false trails. He destroyed it anyway, reducing the structure to rubble in minutes, his message clear. There would be no safe havens for those who'd taken his mate. The second location yielded results. A minor coalition member left behind to guard supplies, who took one look at the silver fire in Yuri's eyes and broke completely. Thornwood Pass, the wolf gasped out, trembling. The old fortress, they're keeping prisoners there. Yuri didn't stay to hear more. He moved through the forest like liquid shadow, faster than should be possible, the landscape blurring around him. The mate bond grew stronger with every mile, Valkyrie's presence like a beacon drawing him forward. When he encountered coalition guards on the road to Thornwood Pass, he didn't slow down. His power hit them like a physical force, dropping 3 of them unconscious before they could raise an alarm. The fourth managed to shift, but Yuri's hand closed around the wolf's throat mid-transformation, slamming him into the ground hard enough to crack stone. How many guards at the fortress? Yuri's voice was barely human. The wolf whimpered, submission radiating from every line of his body. 20. Maybe more. Please. Yuri knocked him unconscious and kept moving. 20 guards were nothing. 100 guards were nothing. He would tear through an army to reach Valkyrie, and the coalition was about to learn exactly what they'd unleashed when they took what belonged to him. Behind him, Constantine and a contingent of royal guards struggled to keep pace, their wolves running flat out to match their king's supernatural speed. They'd never seen anything like this. Legends spoke of alpha ascensions in ancient times, when the mate bond amplified power to godlike levels, but none had witnessed it in living memory. They were witnessing it now, and it was as terrifying as it was magnificent. The coalition hideout was exactly what Valkyrie had expected. Cold stone walls, iron chains, the smell of old blood, and fear. They'd stripped her of the comfortable clothes from the Crimson Keep and dressed her in rags, bound her wrists with silver-laced restraints that burned against her skin and suppressed her wolf. Or tried to suppress her wolf. Marcus stood in front of her cell, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and nervousness. "I have to admit, I didn't think you'd cause this much trouble. You were always so compliant." Valkyrie didn't answer. She was listening to something deeper. The frantic flutter of her baby's heartbeat. Faster than normal, responding to her fear and pain. The child's power stirred within her. A warmth that had been growing stronger since the kidnapping, as if her baby knew they were in danger and was trying to help. "The Alpha King will come for you, of course," Marcus continued, pacing in front of the bars. "And when he does, we'll be ready. He'll walk right into our trap, throw away his kingdom for a used Omega who couldn't even give me a decent—" Pain exploded across Valkyrie's abdomen, sharp and fierce, but not the pain of injury. This was transformation, power unlocking in her bloodline, activated by maternal desperation and the blood bond to an ascending Alpha King. Her baby's heartbeat synced with hers, two rhythms becoming one, and the silver-laced restraints that had suppressed her wolf began to glow. Then they shattered. The transformation hit Valkyrie like lightning, her body erupting into her wolf form for the first time since the rejection. But this wasn't the modest brown wolf she'd been before. This was silver, gleaming and powerful, larger than any female wolf she'd ever seen, with eyes that blazed with ancient royal power. Marcus stumbled backward, his face draining of color. "That's impossible!" Valkyrie's jaws closed around the cell bars and wrenched them apart like they were made of clay rather than steel. The coalition guards rushed forward, but they were too slow, too weak compared to what she'd become. She moved through them like water, not killing but incapacitating, her newfound strength making the fight almost effortless. In a distant part of her consciousness, Valkyrie felt Yuri through the mate bond, felt his answering power surge as he sensed her transformation, felt his fierce pride and overwhelming relief that she was fighting, surviving, becoming. The cell block held other prisoners, wolves from smaller packs who'd resisted coalition control, locked away to break their spirits. Valkyrie tore open their cells with the same ease she'd destroyed her own, her silver wolf radiating authority that made them fall in behind her instinctively. "Get out," she commanded, her voice resonating with Luna power she hadn't known she possessed. "Run. Get to the Crimson Keep. Tell them the Alpha King's mate fights." They scattered, and Valkyrie turned toward the main fortress, toward where she could feel Marcus's presence and the other coalition leaders. They'd taken her because they thought she was weak, had rejected her, tortured her, tried to kill her child. It was time they learned the truth about what they'd awakened. The fortress corridors erupted into chaos as Valkyrie fought her way through, no longer the terrified victim, but a force of nature. Guards fell before her, their weapons useless against her speed and power. The baby's heartbeat drummed in her chest like war drums, lending her strength, protecting her from harm in ways that defied explanation. She burst into the main hall to find Marcus and 3 coalition leaders preparing their trap for Yuri. Silver weapons, spelled chains, poison-tipped arrows. They spun toward her, and the shock on their faces was almost worth the hours of captivity. "Hello, Marcus." Valkyrie's wolf spoke with her voice, the words rumbling with supernatural resonance. "Remember when you called me barren and weak?" Marcus shifted desperately, his brown wolf charging toward her with jaws open. Valkyrie met him mid-leap, her superior size and strength sending him crashing into the stone floor. She pinned him there, her jaws at his throat, and felt the savage satisfaction of reversal, the rejected Omega now dominant over the Alpha who'd thrown her away. "You're nothing," she growled against his fur. "You always were. And this child you tried to kill? She'll rule kingdoms while your name rots in history as a cautionary tale." She could kill him. Should kill him. By rights. But Valkyrie found she didn't want his death on her conscience. She wanted him to live with the knowledge that he'd discarded something precious, that his weakness and cruelty had cost him everything while she'd gone on to become something magnificent. She released him and turned to the coalition leaders. "Leave. All of you. Return to your territories and wait for judgment. Or stay and face the Alpha King when he arrives. Your choice." They ran. Marcus limped after them, his wolf form battered and broken, his tail between his legs in the ultimate gesture of defeat and submission. Valkyrie watched him go and felt nothing but pity for what he'd become. Then the mate bond blazed like the sun at noon, and she knew Yuri had arrived. Yuri hit the fortress like a hurricane given flesh, his power obliterating the outer defenses in seconds. Coalition wolves scattered before him, their fighting spirits broken by the sheer magnitude of Alpha authority rolling off him in waves. He was magnificent and terrible, silver fire incarnate, unstoppable. And then he saw her. Valkyrie stood in the fortress courtyard in her silver wolf form, surrounded by unconscious guards and broken weapons, her eyes blazing with the same power that burned in his veins. The mate bond between them ignited, crimson and silver light erupting from both their bodies and twining together like living things. The shockwave of their combined power hit every wolf on the battlefield, dropping them to their knees in involuntary submission. This was what the prophecy had meant. Not just a child who would unite the kingdoms, but parents whose combined authority transcended anything seen in living memory. Yuri shifted back to human form, not caring about his nakedness or the dozen weapons pointed in his direction. His eyes never left Valkyrie as she transformed as well, her silver wolf melting back into the woman he'd bound himself to, now radiating power that matched his own. Valkyrie. Her name left his lips like a prayer. She ran to him and he caught her, pulling her against his chest with desperate strength. The mate bond sealed fully in that moment, not just connected but merged, their souls recognizing each other with absolute certainty. When their lips met, it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was explosive, passionate, a claiming that left no doubt about what they were to each other. "Mine," the bond sang. "Ours. Forever." Around them, the battlefield had gone completely still. Coalition wolves who'd been preparing to fight now knelt in submission, overwhelmed by the sheer authority radiating from the mated pair. Even Marcus, limping at the edge of the crowd, had dropped to his belly in the ultimate gesture of surrender. Constantine approached carefully, his head bowed in respect. "Your Majesties, the coalition leaders have been captured. They await your judgment." Yuri barely heard him. His hands framed Valkyrie's face, his eyes searching hers for signs of harm. "Are you hurt? The baby?" "We're fine." Valkyrie's hand covered his where it pressed against her abdomen. "Better than fine. Yuri." I shifted. "My bloodline?" I felt it. His voice was rough with emotion. "Through the bond, I felt you awakening. You were magnificent." "We were magnificent," she corrected, and kissed him again, softer this time. Together. The baby kicked between them, strong and healthy, and both parents felt it. Felt the power of the child who would unite kingdoms, born from true mates and ancient bloodlines. The prophecy. Constantine said quietly. It's complete. The child will bring unity, but only because both parents claim their power. Only because you found each other. Yuri pulled Valkyrie closer, his chin resting on top of her head. Take the coalition into custody, strip them of their territories and redistribute the lands to the pacts they oppressed. And Marcus, his eyes found his mate's former mate, still prostrated in the dirt. Exile. He lives only because my mate chooses mercy, but he's never to set foot in our territories again. Marcus didn't argue. He slunk away, defeated and diminished, while Valkyrie watched with quiet satisfaction. She'd won. Not through violence or revenge, but by becoming more than anyone, including herself, had believed possible. Take me home, she murmured against Yuri's chest. Take us home. And he did, lifting her into his arms and carrying her toward the future they would build together. Alpha King and Luna Queen, bound by blood and choice, and love that had conquered every obstacle placed in their path.